Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the death of Emman Nimedez. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. He was a YouTube sensation from the Philippines. I don't have his time of birth, so I had to improvise and do a solar/sunrise chart. He had passed away due, I believe it's to some leukemia cancer. It was some kind of it was a blood cancer, I believe, and what happened was he lost his life at the end because there was kidney failure at the time of his passing. And I'm going to talk about some elements in his natal chart and in transits that might have contributed to the passing. Now, first off, though, I want to offer my condolences to the friends and the family members of this person. It's just a shame you hear about people dying very early. It seems like there's a lot of celebrities lately that are passing, and they're at very relatively young ages, and Pluto is often involved. I mean, it is a very strong culprit because Pluto does govern death, and it's no surprise when I'm looking at his chart. Okay, as far as the first off, I want to say there's a little might be some slight controversy over his birth information because I had one number of sources have him at April 3rd, 1993. That's what I'm going with, but there's a few others that have him at like April 3rd, 1999, but the majority seem to have him at April 3rd, 1993. So it is a little bit speculative, but I'm going to go with what I saw as the majority. Now, looking at his chart, I mean, he's a sun in Aries, and based on the state and time, the improvised solar sunrise chart, it's a Leo moon, and a lot of his videos, I believe they were like parodies. I don't know if he did any singing or songwriting. It seemed like there was some kind of a write-up somewhere or on some link that he may have done it, but you have to confer that on through Google searches. This was a somewhat impromptu video. He is somebody, I mean, Sun in Aries, of course, the basic nature being very pioneering and fearless and having a lot of initiative and enterprise. It's not surprising his Venus conjuncts his Sun because that could be connected with entertainment and really enjoyment was obviously strongly a strong part of his nature. And the thing is, having the moon in Leo, I mean, one way, I mean, probably like to give some impression of some kind of grandeur, but on a positive note, he was somebody who would put a lot of that Aries Sun fearlessness, that courageous as the enterprise and initiative into matters with entertainment, notoriety, exposure, getting applause, being lauded. He had like over 1 million YouTube subscribers, I believe, and he was obviously had attained some notoriety and recognition for this. But going back, I find I'm looking at his chart, and based on the solar sunrise time, it gives him actually a cardinal grand cross. And when you're talking about grand cross configurations in astrology, they often can bring about a lot of tribulation, and it's often referred to as that cross to bear. Now it has the Sun in Aries as part of it, which is of course the life, and you're talking about Mars in Cancer, and Mars can be about blood, and you're talking about Jupiter in Libra. When he passed away, he had kidney failure at this time. His Jupiter is retrograde in Libra. As I've spoken about in previous videos, Jupiter could be rather paradoxical, could be very strongly benign and benevolent, but it could also have that tendency to enlarge and expand. Jupiter in Libra can sometimes give enlarged kidney issues and problems, which he likely had, and it falls in the solar sunrise chart, falls in the 6th house of health. I have my Jupiter in Libra and my chart in the 6th house, making an inconjunct aspect to my Taurus ascendant, and I had kidney stone issues at one time, and I had them pulverized actually. And anyway, And the other, and Jupiter can also be issues with the blood. Mars and Jupiter can be tied in with blood issues and disorders. He has the Mars in Cancer in its fall, and Jupiter in Libra. And again, Jupiter can be about blood as well, and it's in the sixth house of health. And also I'm including, this could be a little controversial. I'm including his Capricorn midheaven in that Grand Cross configuration. Some people will not use the midheaven or the ascendant in, configurations in astrology. They stick with the planets. I think they're important proponents in an astrological chart. So I'm using it, and if somebody wants to perceive it as like a weak Grand Cross configuration, it is based on the solar sunrise chart. But anyway, and again, I mean, sadly he did pass away at a relatively young age. He had transit Pluto very close to his natal Neptune at the time, so it's not surprising that when he passed, when he died of some kind of disease, and this is also another thing too. I noticed he was stated that he couldn't speak at the time. I mean, shortly before he died, that that he wasn't able to speak or had some difficulty speaking. Well, I mean, first off, he does have Mercury in its detriment and fall in Pisces, and in the solar sunrise chart falls in the 12th house of the accidental detriment and fall for Mercury. So that could be an indicator at some point having some limitation in communication. Now, also, it's the ruler of his third house, so it puts the ruler of the third house of communications in the 12th house of limitations. Now, understand, I mean, it's the solar sunrise chart. It puts Gemini on the cusp of the third house, so it does tell me, though, he probably was actually voluble, probably actually had a very good, spoke very well, probably was very had a good, as far as being very articulate, maybe had certain ability to assimilate many subjects, and versatile mind. But at the same time, having Mercury in Pisces could sometimes give you a little bit disorganization in your thought process, and sometimes, a little bit, it could give some mental chaos. When Mercury is in a water sign, the emotions can sometimes cloud logical thinking as well. So those are some things to look at, and Mercury in Pisces is not going to see a lot of the details in something, as opposed to like a Mercury in Virgo, which of course could be very punctilious with details. But that being said, it's I'm looking also at his chart, and transit Jupiter was not far from his natal Pluto as well. And again, Jupiter could be about blood related issues. And I'm sorry, no, transit Jupiter was not far from his natal Neptune, and that could expand issues with diseases. Sometimes that's how that could manifest and pan out. Now, another thing I noticed now, looking at his chart now, the seventh house, I would say, could be connected with the kidneys, because seventh house in astrology does correspond with Libra. Libra corresponds with the kidneys. The ruler of his seventh house falls in the 12th house of restrictions, and I want to go back to the inability to talk during the time I believe he was hospitalized. He had transit Neptune not far from his natal Mercury, so that can manifest in the dissolving and dissipation of communication. And the thing about it is, and going back to that grand cross configuration with Jupiter opposing the Sun, that's another indicator of perhaps Jupiter and Libra opposing the Sun. And the opposition aspect certainly didn't help in him having this issue with the kidneys, dying of kidney failure. Now, also the ruler of the sixth house of health falls in the 12th house of restrictions as well. So that's an indicator of passing away. Well, I'm sorry. Of some kind of health issues or debilitation, some issues with health that was very that was very limiting and restricting, and may have caused hospitalization. 12th house is connected with hospitalization. And another thing too is that he has one of the rulers of the 12th house and the 6th house in his chart. So that's another indicator of some kind of limiting health issue or debilitation. And the thing about it too is I'm looking at this as well. He also has now he has Pluto in the 8th house in his chart. Now I don't think, I mean, Pluto can be connected with viruses, something deadly, and so if he had lived, he might have been more susceptible to some kind of like virus, like the coronavirus, and perhaps passing due to that. But the thing about and also too, cancer, passing away due to some kind of cancer can be very, I mean, it's obviously something potentially perilous, and I mean, he does have Pluto in the 8th house. Now another thing looking at too is one of the rulers, say one of well, actually the ruler of the 4th house. He has the zodiac sign Cancer on the cusp of the 4th house, falls in the 5th house, but it's conjunct Chiron. So it's not surprising that there was going to be some suffering during the time at the end or the latter part of his life. Hold on a moment, people. See, the fact that he's got Chiron conjunct the moon in Leo, it wouldn't surprise me if there might have been some suffering that was due to some area in the chest or the heart area. He also, with the Mars in Cancer, can manifest in times as injuries or some kind of physical debilitations with the chest, the breast area, and the stomach as well. So those are some. I mean, those are some things we're looking at right now in terms of transits, and also as far as natal placements that might have tied in, set to a very, I mean, early passing for him, sadly. So, anyways, really not much more I had to say about this as far as transits go, and issues with his. As far as him passing early, and again, I do want to offer my condolences as far as this goes to family and friends. Oh, another thing that was pretty blatant, I should have noticed that sooner, is that he also at this time had transit Chiron not far from his natal sun. And when you have Chiron and the sun close to each other, I mean, you're talking about an Aries as well. It wouldn't surprise, I mean, well, regardless of sign, transit Chiron close to the natal sun in astrology can reflect or manifest in issues with the physical body. Yes, the ascendant is what dominates the physical body, and often debilitations associated with the sign on the ascendant, but the sun can play a role in physical matters as well. And when you have transit Chiron very close to the sun, it's not considered, I mean, I call it a loose conjunction in this case, because solar sunrise time puts his sun at 13 degrees Aries. Transit Chiron was like 9 degrees, is not like 9 degrees Aries at the time, or 8 degrees Aries. So you're talking about issues that can manifest in physical suffering for the body, and also the vitality and the energy and the life of the person. So there may have been some issues he might have been dealing with. You're talking about in Aries, and it could be something. It might have also been something with the skull or the head or the eyes that might have been problematic at this time. But with him, it seems like it was just more a general issue with vitality and life. So, and also in transit Chiron was also very close to his natal Venus. And this is also, and that's another indicator of something that, where you might have to deal with some kind of suffering that could be associated with the kidneys, because Venus is over the kidneys. It was also the ruler of his 7th house, and the 7th house does correspond with Libra. He does have Libra on the cusp of the 7th house anyway, but the 7th house in astrology is the house of Libra, and that would govern the kidneys. So, Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.